You need to stop scrolling right now because what I'm about to reveal is not rumor, not gossip, and not another hot take from cable news. At 6:52 this morning, 4 senior party leaders entered a private conference room for what was scheduled as a standard strategy session. 53 minutes later, they emerged, and within 3 hours, the political establishment was ablaze with the most significant internal rebellion we've witnessed since the Nixon resignation. This isn't about disagreeing on legislation. This is about senior members concluding that their leader has crossed into territory they can no longer defend. And what sparked it will shock you. If you want to understand what happens in the next 72 hours, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because the decisions made today will determine whether this party survives intact or shatters beyond repair. Here's what the mainstream outlets haven't connected yet. Here's what I verified through 4 independent sources inside the leadership conference. Early this morning at 1:43 a.m., a phone call was placed demanding immediate action on what insiders are calling the Executive Authority Enhancement Measure. The ultimatum was crystal clear: force a vote by end of week or face coordinated opposition in home districts. The threat included personal campaigning against sitting members in their own territories. Then at 5:45 a.m., leaked recordings started spreading through secure channels. Audio of private remarks stating, "Congress is advisory. These individuals answer to me." That recording circulated among the upper ranks, and the response wasn't panic, it was rage. By 6:52 a.m., an emergency session was convened. 4 leaders behind locked doors for 53 minutes, and what they decided in that room represents the most serious challenge to executive dominance from within the party that we have ever documented. To grasp why this rebellion matters, you need to understand the system that has kept this party in line for nearly a decade. It hasn't been about shared ideology. It hasn't been about policy agreement. It has been about fear deployed with surgical precision, fear that can paralyze an entire political organization. Every member understands the cautionary tales. In early 2020, one senator votes for conviction during an impeachment proceeding. The retaliation is swift and merciless. That senator is labeled treasonous, officially condemned by their home party apparatus, marginalized and politically wounded. The message resonates: oppose and suffer. In 2021, another senator breaks ranks on a conviction vote. He attempts reconciliation afterward, debases himself publicly, votes in lockstep repeatedly, pursues approval that remains perpetually out of reach. And the instant his usefulness diminishes, a primary opponent receives full backing regardless. The lesson intensifies. Allegiance isn't protection, it only postpones the inevitable. Then in 2023, a House leader negotiates an independent fiscal agreement. Private disapproval follows, and within weeks, that leader is stripped of his position entirely. The message becomes undeniable. Anyone can be eliminated at any moment for any transgression. This is how authoritarian discipline operates. You don't need to punish everyone. You make vivid examples. After that, fear handles the rest. For nearly a decade, that fear has been total. Members watched careers implode, watched colleagues get publicly humiliated, watched the price of resistance play out in real time, and they kept calculating that compliance was safer than defiance. But there was one miscalculation. Fear only functions until people realize the threat is permanent, regardless of behavior. That realization arrived this week because 3 critical factors aligned simultaneously and changed every calculation. First, the electoral mathematics shifted dramatically. The upcoming Senate map is catastrophic for the party. 24 seats are vulnerable compared to only 10 opposition seats, and current polling reveals that association with chaos has become a net liability. Specific data from Arizona, Wisconsin, and North Carolina shows candidates dropping 7 to 9 points when directly connected to recent controversies. One member told a colleague plainly, "I can defend conservative principles. I cannot defend instability." Second, the international incident isn't just embarrassing, it's strategically dangerous. Security alliance partners are expressing serious concern. The military leadership community is in open dissent. One former chairman of the Joint Chiefs characterized it as recklessness masquerading as strength. Members serving on defense committees understand what typical voters don't grasp. When you publicly discuss potential military operations against Allied sovereign territory, you're not negotiating leverage. You're undermining decades of strategic architecture. Third, the legal complications are accelerating rapidly. Multiple prosecutions are advancing faster than anticipated. Emergency procedural delays are being rejected. Court dates are being locked into the calendar, and a prominent party attorney stated privately that they're facing the prospect of nominating someone who could be facing federal sentencing by Election Day. When you layer electoral vulnerability with foreign policy, recklessness, and escalating legal jeopardy, the risk-reward calculation transforms completely. Defending chaos stops being merely uncomfortable and starts resembling political annihilation. According to 3 sources familiar with Wednesday morning's session, here's what transpired behind those closed doors. The participants: the institutionalist who served 4 decades, the pragmatic strategist positioning for future leadership, the loyalist experiencing crushing pressure from constituents, and the electoral realist who's watching his approval ratings collapse in real time. The senior member opened by playing the audio, the complete 4-minute recording. He played it twice. Nobody spoke initially. One source described those moments as suffocating because every person present understood the implications. This wasn't frustration with congressional procedure. This was a declaration that congressional authority was irrelevant. The electoral realist followed with brutal honesty. He said his home state polling had him trailing by 5 points, and every single point tracked directly to chaos-adjacent coverage. He told them voters want governance and predictability, not their senator explaining why the executive is discussing territorial expansion into allied nations. This is where it becomes critical, because what the senior member proposed wasn't symbolic resistance, it was structural warfare. He presented a framework. First, draft a joint statement to the administration making clear the legislative body will not advance expanded executive authorities. Second, announce that leadership will not appear at campaign events unless the foreign policy messaging is substantially moderated. Third, make explicit that if primary challenges are initiated against sitting members, the full financial resources of the party's Senate campaign apparatus will defend incumbents aggressively. Then he looked each of them in the eye and demanded immediate commitment. The strategist agreed instantly. The realist agreed. The loyalist sat silent for what one source described as the most excruciating 40 seconds of the entire meeting. Then he said this was asking him to commit career suicide. The response came back: this is asking you to fulfill your constitutional oath. The loyalist finally agreed. 4 men, 4 commitments. And with that decision, the structure that held this party together for nearly a decade began fracturing. What followed moved with extraordinary velocity. At 8:47 a.m., personal calls went out to 18 senior members with one simple question: we're moving forward. Are you with us? 4 committed within minutes. 3 moderates who'd been quietly resistant for years. That was anticipated. But 3 commitments sent shockwaves through everyone involved. The most vocal defender, the member who'd been vacationing with the executive just days earlier, the senator who'd defended every controversy and every indictment on national television for years, suddenly breaks. A source close to that senator says he told colleagues he's defended everything imaginable, but he won't defend threatening military action against allied democratic nations. He won't defend dismantling legislative constitutional authority, and he won't defend branding dissenting members as traitors. He said there's a boundary, and it got crossed. By 10:23 a.m., the formal letter is complete. 6 pages, constitutional language, institutional framing. The critical passage, according to a copy described by sources, states they can no longer, in good conscience, enable conduct that threatens constitutional governance and undermines the institutional authority of the legislative branch. Before noon, 15 signatures are secured. At 11:15 a.m., word reaches the other side. A staff member alerts through encrypted communication that opposition is coalescing around a formal letter rejecting the executive authority push, and it's going public today. According to leaked internal messages circulating among aides, the response is immediate fury. All capitals. Betrayal. Every single one. Then the countermoves begin. Calls start going out to loyalists. At 12:37 p.m., the first call to the most vocal defector. The conversation lasts 90 seconds. Someone briefed on the exchange says the message delivered is, "You're finished." The response comes back, Then I'm finished. Call ends. Another call to a second defector threatening complete political destruction. That senator responds according to the same source that the destruction is self-inflicted and to do whatever seems necessary. 3 attempts to reach the senior member organizing the revolt. None are answered. By 1:15 p.m., the fracture becomes publicly visible. House leadership releases a statement of unconditional support for the executive. Senate leadership remains noticeably, conspicuously silent. Political reporters catch the gap immediately. By 1:50 p.m., major publications are running stories about Senate leadership refusing to endorse the executive authority expansion demand. At 2:30 p.m., the letter leaks, and sources confirm this was deliberate. The Washington Post receives the full text. Politico confirms the signatures within 8 minutes. By 2:45 p.m., the complete document is circulating everywhere, and the political establishment understands this isn't private disagreement, this is open warfare. But the detail that emerges roughly 30 minutes later reveals how seriously this is being treated. A senior strategist with knowledge of internal contingency planning says Senate leadership has prepared a 3-phase response framework if retaliation escalates. Phase 1, if public attacks commence, 7 additional senators issue coordinating, supporting statements, and leadership holds a press conference affirming they respect executive authority but serve constitutional principles first. Internal probability assessment 75%. Phase 2, if primary challenges are launched, the Leadership Political Action Committee commits $40 million to defend incumbents, the Senate Campaign Committee refuses to fund challengers, and corporate donors are mobilized around the message that the conference stands unified. Probability, 55%. Phase 3 is what they hope never activates. If escalation continues, the Senate advances formal legislation restricting executive emergency authorities, requiring bipartisan coalition support, and potentially including formal censure mechanisms. Probability, 35%. One senator involved reportedly told colleagues they've scenario planned every possibility, and if confrontation is chosen, they're prepared, and this time there's no backing down. Now here's the element that reshapes how you should interpret what happens next. While one party was fracturing Wednesday afternoon, the opposition held their own closed session. Sources indicate their leader made a calculation that will determine the entire next phase. The response to that silence proves telling because when no external enemy is provided, the internal fractures widen dramatically.